For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Dan Weber for instant analysis of USC's Wednesday practice of Washington week. Now, Dan, let's start off with injury updates because that's so critical this week. Kedon Slovis was still not dressed out today. He only watched practice, so it looks like he's still going through concussion protocol and is not cleared. We didn't get a chance to talk to Clay Helton today, but we'll get more word on that on Thursday. And then we also did not see the return of Elijah Griffin or Talanoa Hufanga. But Dan, that seems like two critical guys in USC's secondary that Clancy Pendergast said that they're preparing for all options come Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a big break that Isaac Taylor-Stewart came back.
Yeah.
So you're probably going to have him, Isaac Taylor and Stewart and Chris Steele at corners. Probably Chase Williams stepping in at safety for Talanoa. Although, I think if he's cleared by tomorrow, he would have. I would think it's easier for him to come back and play than it would be for Kedon if he misses the first 2 or 3 days of the week for a quarterback. So, but Talanoa is still going around with that towel over his head. Yeah. That's probably not a really good sign. He looks like, whereas Kedon doesn't look like, the sun's bothering him. He's got a baseball cap on, but and maybe it's just the fact that Talanoa doesn't like to wear baseball caps. I don't know.
True.
But he looks like he's got a little more ways to come than say Kedon. But I don't. Right now, you get the feeling that they're making plans for them. At this point in the week, you pretty much have to say, if for some reason they come back, that's a bonus. But we're not going to plan for them to be there and then find out they're not going to be there.
Yeah. And in that sense, since there's going to be some shuffling in that secondary, how important is it for USC's defense to get pressure in this game? 3 of the 4 quarterbacks they've faced so far this season have been mobile, but Jacob Eason is a pocket passer. So how important is that defensive line to get some pressure and take some of the pressure off of their back guys?
And that's one of the better things they've done this year. I think they're 25th in the nation with sacks. So a lot of their defensive numbers aren't all that good, but their sack numbers are good. Their forced fumble numbers are really good, up to like 3 in 4 games. So it's obvious they're doing things on the move. They're not always finishing plays. Sometimes running by guys, but they could run to the football. Now, I think in this game, they really have to run to the football, especially on the drop back passes. They just got to get there, get in his face. I think that's what happened when you remember the game 3 years ago, which certainly Clay's biggest road win ever, is they made Browning kid, the quarterback, very, very uncomfortable. That was a Washington team headed to the playoffs, but USC really didn't let him throw the ball. They didn't let him. He was looking out for where were they coming from. You had obviously Uchenna Nwosu and Porter Gustin had like his first game that we saw. Wow, what he could be. So that might be a little bit of a model for. There are different kinds of quarterbacks, but the same situation would apply if you really get a lot of pressure, get in their face, make them throw it a little bit sooner than they would like to, make them a little bit uncomfortable, get them off their spots.
Yeah, and you mentioned those missed tackles and sometimes those missed opportunities to get the quarterback down. You got to talk to defensive coordinator Clancy Pendergast about what they're doing to address those issues and how they're practicing according to those issues.
So they're changing the kinds of tackling drills they're doing and changing them up every week, and he just is still not tackling anybody to the ground and scrimmages and that. That's just not who they are. That's not what they do. Clancy spent a good bit of time in the NFL. Clay that's just not how he sees it. And as Clancy said, Clay's the one that has kind of figured out how he wants them practicing from spring on. And so they do a lot of drills, and they change up the drills. And it's just one of those where they say, we just have to do better. We just have to do better. Palier said, we got to break down better, keep our heads up, widen their base, do all those kinds of things that instead of running by somebody and take the right angles. But that's the challenge for this team, I think, is they play well in the red zone. They play well. They've been a pretty good third down team, if you take away, say, the quarterbacks, I think Clancy said there are like 6 of those.
Yeah.
You take those away, they're really a good third down team. So, they've got to kind of make it all come together. And after 4 games, it's pretty much time to, if you're going to get better on defense, you probably ought to be close to being there now. And if they, run and tackle, what we said, we were talking to Keely Eure, and he gave me a little quote about describing this team on defense. If you had to describe it, what would you say? How would you describe it? And he said, fast, aggressive, and run to the ball.
Yep.
But then we would all like to add and tackle somebody when we get there. Would be the perfect 4th characteristic there.
Yeah, well, you mentioned some statistics of where USC's defense lies and how that compares to what we're seeing on the field. And basically, they allow teams to move the ball, but once they get into the red zone, they kind of stop them there. And you talked to Clancy Pendergast about that, and he essentially said, well, that's what matters, right? Not letting them score. But even if they move the ball, if we don't let them score, that's a win in his book.
Yeah, they're giving up 24 points a game. So scoring defense is like they're 57th in the country. So they're slightly in the top half. I think one of the areas where they're having trouble, they're 90th in passing defense, giving up 250 yards a game, and they're 90th in total defense with giving up 421 yards a game. And where they really are getting hurt are on the long plays. They are 112th in opponents' long plays, 113th in opponents' long passing plays, and 100th in opponents' long rushing plays. And what they do is they categorize them 10 yards or more, 20 yards or more, 30 yards or more. And they've just given up, I think they've given up 64 what are considered long plays. And that's probably too many.
Yeah.
I mean, UCLA has given up more than that, and Washington State. But in the Pac-12, those are the only teams that have given up more long plays than USC. USC's got too much talent to be giving up that many long plays.
Yeah, that's true. But also, I feel like that's also just have been a staple of Clancy's defense, where they'll just give up long plays, that kind of the bend but don't break. Do you see that really changing? Because I feel like that's what we've just seen from Clancy.
Clancy said that as much. That's who we are. That's what we do. We take some chances. We'll and as they show with the forced fumbles and sacks and that kind of thing, that they're pretty competitive there. But then the downside has been, I'm not quite sure why they're 113th in long pass plays. I mean, I know there are young guys back there, but it doesn't necessarily seem like that. Yeah. But the numbers are the numbers, and that's not where you want to be.
Yeah. As far as injury updates go, I gave you most of them at the top of the video, but the only other real notable one is Christian Rector. He returned and practiced today. He was dressed out. And Dan, you got to talk to him about how he's feeling and what he expects for Saturday.
Well, he came in pads. He didn't have pads on yesterday. And he had a big smile on his face. And so I asked him afterwards, I said, you look like you're feeling pretty good. And Clay had said he's feeling better this week than he was the same time last week. I said, did you expect to play 57 plays last night? And he said, absolutely not. No way. I said, how'd you do? And he said, well, I said, how's your ankle? He said, well, maybe you need to talk to Coach Helton about that, which is the standard answer.
Yeah.
I mean, Coach Helton, the assistant coaches aren't allowed to talk about injuries. Players aren't, just Coach Helton. And I said, well, Coach Helton doesn't talk to us on Wednesdays. We only get to talk to you. So I'll just ask you this. Is this one of those injuries you can kind of play through and it doesn't get worse? If you kind of play through it, and he said, you could say that. So, but he certainly looked like he felt good today, and that's a good thing. I think it's really important to have him on the field Saturday.
Yeah, that's a big boost there. But as far as this matchup goes, USC's defense versus UW's offense, what are you seeing? What are potential areas of concern for Trojan fans?
Well, I think the thing you would want to do is you just need to be physical, and you need to. I think that's traditionally been a place where Washington has tried to be a physical and fundamentally sound team. But if USC goes up there and plays to their ability, they probably have better athletes. Now, Washington is definitely getting better. And they're technically, if you go by the rosters, they have the second best team in the Pac-12 next to USC. But still, USC's significantly higher, in the national pecking order if you just take all the players on your roster. But I think if they could control the game in a physical way, where Washington says, man, these guys are a little bit bigger and stronger and tougher than we are, that's the kind of thing that certainly happened in 2016, where the place gets really quiet and their players kind of look like they're better than us. But I think you have to establish that. You've got to be sound, and you really got to play physical. I mean, you've got to come out playing physical right away. I think USC's got the potential to do that. We don't always see it, especially on the road, where they just take over and try to take somebody out of their stadium. But I think that's the key, is just be as physical as you can be. And it's not easy because of the way they practice. They don't practice being really physical. So that's always a challenge, especially on the road, especially against a well-coached and fundamentally sound team.
Yeah. In that sense, how are you expecting Saturday to go? I know you kind of already alluded to this, but 2016 was arguably Clay Helton's best win, especially on the road in his coaching tenure. How do you expect this to go in kind of a rematch of that game?
I think that's, I think it's one of those games. Who was I was reading? Stuart Mandel, Bruce Feldman, Andy Staples. One of the national guys said he thought it was going to be a big quarterback game, and that a decent amount of scoring. So I'm going to stick with my number that I always call for games like this that I think could be fairly close is 31-28, and you pick who's got the field goal. We'll see. But I think it has the potential to be that kind of a game where, somebody makes the last play that really matters. I think it'll be interesting too. Does Marquis Stepp get on the field earlier, and does it allow USC to eliminate some of those 3 and outs and maybe sustain some drives and not have just 54 plays like they had against Utah? They probably need to run the ball a little bit more successfully, and they probably need to control the ball a little bit more.
Yeah. Alrighty, any final thoughts, Dan, before we wrap it up here on Washington week?
Well, I think it's interesting. We haven't noticed that they're doing a lot for the potential rain or not rain, and we keep hearing. I mean, they added an air raid siren to the noise machine today, so that was something, or it was either a tornado siren or something. It was a siren, but and maybe it'll turn out that way. Everybody tells me every time they look at the weather forecast. It's kind of a different forecast for Saturday. I mean, all week it looks like maybe rain, but then the question is what happens on Saturday. So I don't know how that's going to play out. That would be a time where you really like Big Ben Griffiths to be able to have the big game that everybody's been waiting for if it becomes one of those kind of rainy days and you've got to really depend on your punter. So there's always that as well.
Yep. Alrighty, that's going to wrap it up here from USC on Washington Week. For Dan Weber, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.